So, Jean-François, I guess we need to start, and we talked about this a couple of times during the afternoon with the new Léger poll results. I want to say good news, obviously, for the PQ, but I wonder if it's worse news for the CAQ than it is good news for the PQ.
Well, that's correct. Robert Bourassa used to say, well, it's interesting to see the voting intentions, but what you have to keep your eye on is the level of satisfaction or insatisfaction of a government. Because in the end, when people will choose amongst lesser evils, if they're satisfied with the government, well, it gives it an edge. And so now we're in a place where a clear majority, more than 60% of Quebecers, are dissatisfied with the government and heavily dissatisfied. So that's more difficult to change. And so if there were an election today, they would lose. I mean, the PQ would have a majority. And that's very troublesome for the CAQ because it means that they're vying for the same ridings. You know, they won't be competitive on the West Island or in Gatineau, but they're competitive everywhere else. And so they have a very hard hill to climb back up. And if I were an advisor to François Legault, I'd be very hard-pressed to say, listen, you go on the fundamentals, you stop looking at the polls, and there's a point in the second mandate when leaders stop looking at the polls, even in internal polls, because it's too depressing. And they say, okay, we'll do what we think is best and hope for the best. And so we'll see.
This same poll showed that support for separation is still quite low. You would think that with support for the PQ rising, that support for separation would also rise.
That's correct. And although he had, Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon had a very good run with his first-year budget earlier this season, it didn't affect the support for sovereignty. Now, Plamondon said today that he thinks we're on the verge of a shift. Well, he hopes that it's not impossible. And when you look at these polls that show, like, the most depressing for nationalists is the one that asks, would you rather have an independent Quebec or sign the current constitution and be a province like the others? And you have 47% signing the constitution and only about 30% going for an independent Quebec. So that's very depressing. But if you ask another question, do you want Quebec to be recognized as a nation within the Canadian Constitution? They say yes at 70%, which is not being a province like the others. If you ask them, do you want to have all powers in education, in language, in immigration? They'll say yes at 70%. So what you have is an electorate that on the national unity question simply has lost its sextant. It doesn't know where it is. It depends on the question. So you can see this as, well, there's nothing to be done with that group, or you can see that as, well, there's a lot of volatility on this question.
Look, at the end of the day, and we've had someone comment on this, this is a coalition, right? It's a coalition, the CAQ. And people say this is not about the party so much as it is anger at François Legault specifically. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think it's all to his merit that every bad poll he says, I take blame personally. But he's not alone. And, Éric Girard's pet project of having the king in Quebec City, well, that's Éric Girard. And that was one of the most steadfast ministers he had. And then Léger asked, so give me three things that make you unsatisfied of the government. And the first, 44%, was the fact that he didn't deliver on bettering health and education. And this is beyond the third link or the Kings or whatever. It's really the basic promise of the CAQ that they were managers. They knew how to handle things. They would have top guns leading these departments, and they just can't deliver. I'm not saying it's easy, but they said they could do it, and disappointment ensues.
But I will mention just now, because this is a breaking story, we knew that the government had offered today, the Common Front, at 3 o'clock this afternoon, a new offer, and I'm seeing now
Just
The Common Front has rejected Quebec's latest offer, so there was no settlement in that strike either. And it seems to me, Jean-François, for every day this goes on, this is worse and worse for the government.
I don't understand why in this new offer they didn't go on the inflation threshold. They could have said, listen, let's stop debating about what the inflation is going to be over the 5 years, because it goes back 2 years and then hence 3 years. Let's just agree that we'll cover the inflation for the 2 last years, and we'll wait and see what the inflation is for the next 3 years, and we'll adjust automatically. I say this because it's a Common Front request. They have their number, but they also say, well, let's just adjust to real inflation. And if the government had done that, because they say they're done that in giving this new 12.7% number, but the Common Front said no, it should be 18, and there's disagreement how to calculate it. But if the government had simply said, listen, we'll cover inflation, and then there's a bonus, it would change the nature of the conversation, because then you'd say, okay, so let's see, if inflation is covered, no one will be impoverished, then we can debate how much more we should give them. But as long as they don't do that, I think they cannot get out of the slump.
And so, so we know they've rejected the offer. Those strike days will go forward as planned, December 8th, this Friday, to the 14th. I find myself asking the question, is there a CAQ without Legault? If this anger is directed mainly towards him, does this party survive without him?
Well, you never know until you know. And it's true that, would there be a PQ without René Lévesque? That was a big question we kept asking at the time. Without Lévesque, the PQ would not have been created with that kind of strength and coalition. He was very much the mastermind and the father of the PQ. But then we had, Parizeau, and we had Bouchard, and we had Landry. So it depends on the strength of the people who can succeed him. Now, when you look at Legault, let's say because he said he would stay on for a third or fourth mandate if people wanted him and if he was in good health. Well, his health seems okay for now, but people don't want him anymore. So open the race. You're going to have probably Geneviève Guilbeault, whose standing is still pretty high. In the last time this was polled. Simon Jolin Barrette will probably run, but his standing is not that great. We thought that Drainville would be a player, but clearly he's been in dire difficulties in the last few months. So let's say that it's almost a shoo-in for Geneviève Guilbeault. Now, it all depends on the strength of her personality, program, her ability to reunite the party behind her. It's doable. I'm not saying it's not doable.
If she wears a seatbelt. That's a massive part of it, I think.
I would say, what about Christian Dubé? I mean, he's everybody's, savior during the COVID situation. He's, of course, pretty well regarded now whenever he talks to the public. Do you think he's not a potential successor?
I think he wants to leave as soon as possible.
I think so too.
Oh, so much for that. Okay.
There was a time when it was not sure that he would run again at the last election. And he asked for conditions that he would have the full support of the government for his reform and the full support of some of the actors. And he did have them. But I'm not sure. I hope he stays for the whole mandate, but I'm not absolutely sure that after his new creation is enacted, maybe next week, that he finds the person and persons who will lead this new Santé Québec thing, that he will not say, well, I've done what I needed to do and I'll bow out.
I think we could bet on whether it'll be Dubé or Fitzgibbon to leave first. I think they're both chomping at the bit.
I thought Fitzgibbon already thought he was the premier.
The other day I was at the Salon du Livre signing books, and someone said, I'm very disappointed with the CAQ, especially the Russian guy. I said, who is that? Fitzgibbon. Oh, he's not Russian.
The Russian guy.
Oh, that's very telling.
The Russian guy.
The Russian guy, yeah.
Je comprends pas.
The Lederhosen? What, did that confuse them?
I don't know, because his name.
Fitzgibbon?
Fitzgibbon. I mean, it has nothing to do with Russia, but,
okay.
That's I'm not saying it's representative by.
Yeah, just perception. Okay. Jean-François, thank you. We'll talk to you again next week.
All right.
Take care.